Hey, what's up everyone? How you doing? It's John, and in this video I'll be taking a closer look at the Polymega console. Technically this console came out several years ago. It's now readily available on their website as of this year, which is it's been a long road. I've got an interesting backstory about this console as well, which I'll explain in a second. But essentially what the Polymega is, it's a console. The base module here retails for $550 on their website. It plays out of the box Sega CD games, Grafx CD games, Geo CD, PlayStation 1, and Saturn games out of the box. So it plays 5 different consoles. What's really cool though, it's region free, so you can play games that are in Japan, PAL region, NTSC, which is North America version as well, which really opens up. And there's a really cool library of games that shows you history of the game, screenshots, etc. that's built in here. There's typically 32 gigs of internal SSD memory. You can expand that internally. There's a SD card, a mini SD card slot in the back. I'll show you that in a second, which you can do external memory as well. So basically 32 gigs, 9 gigs or 10 gigs of that is internal memory. So you really only have about 20 gigs to play with internally, which can really add up fast, especially if you're dumping your CD games on here, because an average CD game is probably 30 megs, maybe half a gig, right? So you can really add up pretty quick. So memory-wise, doesn't have much memory. When I say dumping the ROM, this thing is an emulation console at the end of the day. So basically what it does, you put in the CD, or if you have a module, which I'll talk about in a second, it will read that game, or cache it will dump it into the console. You can store it and save it for later. So technically, when you want to play the game again, you don't have to put in the CD, or you don't have to put the card in again, which is unique. You can basically store all your collection onto the unit, and you have one place to play it, which I think is really cool for a collector. I have a ton of games, and let's face it, CD rot is a thing. Cartridges are starting to decay, etc. Right? Especially CDs are starting to decay. So if you have a game that you really want to play, and you worry about not being able to play it in the future, this is a great way to preserve that game. So you basically dump the game. Now, a little backstory about the Polymega. Going back to about circa 2015, 2016, a gentleman named Brian reached out to me via email. We talked on the phone a number of times, and he was telling me about this console called the RetroBlox. If you go on my channel, you can see my videos are still up. I was the first content creator on YouTube to talk about this console back in the day called the RetroBlox. I actually met up with Brian at E3 probably back in 2016 timeframe, and I was able to hold a prototype of the controller. He kept great communication, filling me in on the console. He said, John, I will give you a preview unit. You'll be the first one on YouTube to talk about this console. I invited him out to Game On Expo, which is an event I run in Phoenix, a gaming event. He was going to have a panel. I believe this was about 2016, maybe 2017. He was going to be on the panel. Him and his team were going to talk about the Polymega or RetroBlox back in the day. And last minute, literally like several hours before the panel, he canceled on me and said, we're not going to do it. That kind of irked me a little bit, to be honest with you. I understand at the end of the day, that maybe they changed their mind, made cold feet, whatever. But ever since that moment, Brian has dropped off the face of the earth. I've tried to contact him, email, phone number, text, and he's dropped off the face. So I never heard back from him. I never got a review unit like he promised, which whatever it is, what it is, whatever. But I understand things change. That's great. But for me, communication is super important. And when you drop off the grid like that, that's give someone a cold shoulder, not a really great look. Now, having said that, I'm going to review this unbiased as I can, because I don't want to I'm not going to look at this lens of like the person behind it is, not great communication. So I decided at the end of the day, I did want to purchase this, so I bought this out of my own pocket. It's been out for a while. I did get the bundle, so what I got was the base unit itself, and I got the 4 modules that came with. Now, it retailed for I think it was like $860 for everything, right? I think right now they're doing a sale for $800. The base unit is about $550. Each additional module is $80. So I have a Genesis module, plays Genesis games, will be a separate video. I have a Super Nintendo one, a TurboGrafx, and an NES one. Okay, so got NES. So there's 4, and there's also an N64 one that's technically out, is not currently available on their website. It doesn't come with the bundle. So for their website said that's going to be coming out later this year, 4th quarter. It does come with a unique controller. So each one of these bundles comes with a controller, a base unit, a unit that will plug into the base unit, so you can kind of further your library. I think the whole concept's really cool. So I know a lot of people who follow my channel would be into this. So I'm going to try to review this unbiased as I can. I'm going to talk about the good, I'm going to talk about the bad of this unit and what it is. Initially, they were going to have it be FPGA, kind of like the analog consoles like the NTs and Super NTs. What they decided to do, for cost reasons, they decided to do it emulation style, right? So there's a difference in quality between FPGA and emulation. Most gamers prefer FPGA, but there is a lot more cost to it. I think for a unit like this, for what it does, it probably made sense to do emulation. For the longest time, Saturn, for example, was really hard to emulate. N64 wasn't great for emulation, but emulation's come a long way in the past couple of years. It's really caught up. And when I played this, I'll be honest, I didn't see any huge issues with any of the emulation itself. It loads super quick as well, which is a huge benefit. So without any further ado, let's take a closer look at the base unit. In subsequent videos, I'll cover each one of these modules in itself. So I encourage you guys to subscribe to my channel. Thanks for following me, guys. Let me know what you guys think, and let's take a closer look at the console. Then we'll take a look at some games and see how it performs. Before I show you the interface and testing some games, let's take a closer look at the console itself, right? And the controller in the box. So the box is pretty basic. Look at that clamshell box. Shows you the controller comes with. It does promote that it plays in 1080p HD. I couldn't get it to play in 1080p HD. Maybe it's the capture device I was using, but I couldn't play. All I saw was 720 when I played it. That's interesting. I'm sure it does play in 1080, but when I was playing it, I could only see in 720p. Honestly, not a huge difference. When you're playing retro games, difference between 720 and 1080, not a huge difference. Even playing the Saturn games, they still look pretty dang good. Plays classic cartridges. If you have the module, the base model does not play cartridges, only CDs, CD-based units. Online ready. So built-in Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, that is true. Ethernet cable. There is an adapter for Ethernet cable, so if you do LAN stuff, that's kind of neat. Expandable storage, that is certainly true. Multiplayer ready. Visit Polymega Game Shop. I could not see that there's a game shop yet for digital. They've been talking about it. I did not see any resemblance of any digital game shop. I'm sure that's on its works. I'm sure it's on its way. It does come with standard HDMI cable. It does come with a US, power extension cord, which is crazy long. It's like 6 feet, plenty length, like 6 feet long, 3 feet with the extender more. It does come with a controller, of course. There is a cable from micro USB to USB to charge it. It's lithium battery. I'm not quite sure how long the charge is, but it lasts quite a while. It does have some good feel to it. It does have a dongle here for Bluetooth dongle, so you can play remotely, compare it. Plug and play, I had no issues with it pairing. Standard analog sticks, you got to select, start, your clear button. This is your home button, your home button, and then turbo, which is neat. D-pad, your standard shoulder buttons like a PlayStation 2 or 4 or 3, whatever controller, and you have your A, B, X, Y. This is a different one than their first initial unit, right? So it's changed slightly. I do like the feel. It's a pretty good universal remote, to be honest, okay? Now, as far as the unit itself, this button here, you push and you can slide it over. This is where the modules slide into. Obviously, this is just dust cover here. It doesn't come with one. You can just slide it in. Here's two USB ports for your controllers, or if you have a storage, you can update the BIOS. Your power button to turn on. Your jack here. This is where the CDs go into. And on the back, let me unplug the power adapter. There's your Ethernet network here. Your mini micro SD card slot here for expandable external storage, HDMI, and your power. This is a cooling fan. It does run kind of warm when you play it for a while. It does get kind of warm, so it's a good thing that they do have a fan in there. Overall, it's pretty decent weight. There's another fan here, or vent here, and it's got some rubber pads on the bottom here, so it helps stick it to the table. It doesn't really slide around. Not bad. I mean, really kind of well built, to be honest with you. Let's take a closer look at turn this bad boy on and go from there. First impression, honestly, I really like the interface. Really easy to navigate. You have My Collections, which are different folders of different consoles. Right now, I've not loaded any other games in here, but if I were to load Sega CD game, for example, that collection folder would appear. You can download the games. So automatically when you load a game itself, it downloads the game to the system automatically. You can save it, or if you don't save it, it will delete it once you remove the game or disc. There are a handful of games that came included. There's probably less than 10. When I first got that, there's actually quite a few. There's over 30 or more. It was quite a few. They played great, and then I wanted to load in a new game, and it wouldn't work. I updated it, and a lot of those games disappeared. When you start the game, you have an option: New Game, Classic Mode, Cheat Codes, or Select Patch. Classic Mode, you can't save states, you can't add filters, just Classic Mode. I just prefer to play New Game. This is a fun game, Doodle World. I actually have this game physically on cartridge, and it's believe it or not, a really fun platformer, kind of fun design. Looks like you're playing on a notepad. There's an eraser there, there's pencils, and there's crayons. It's really catchy music. Here's Tower of Turmoil. Here's another homebrew game. This reminds me of like a Mega Man game. If you ever played Battle Kid 1 or 2, which is also a homebrew game for the NES, which is classic, that kind of reminds me of this, but really catchy music, very challenging platformer, just like any other NES game, but instead of a gun in here, like a Mega Man, you have a sword, and you gotta be careful because you can't get hit, otherwise you die. Alright, Shockman, this is a game for the PC Engine. Talk about Mega Man, this definitely is like Mega Man. You can hold the gun down and load up your shot just like you can in Mega Man. Really fun graphics though, for sure, absolutely. Here's a collection, this is really cool. One thing I really liked is you can search by console, and it will show you games like the game you just played. You can search by year, you can search by developer, and then every game has information about the game, and it has screenshots, which is really cool. So there's a huge library in here that's included. So if you have you want to keep track of your inventory and what games you're missing, what games you have, Polymega is a really good system to use it. It's really cool. I really like that part of this for sure. Here's another TurboGrafx 16 game that's included. This is, I think it's Egg something. I forget what it was called, but you have this dinosaur in your pouch here. Kind of a fun, cute little platformer. Okay, go to settings. I want to show you some storage and what's included. So here's the storage. I mentioned there's about 30 gigs free. 9 gigs of it though are the system itself, right? The games and the software. So it's 20 gigs kind of can fill up really, really fast. Here are the systems games I've had. I loaded Donkey Kong Country 2 already in this. When you put in the game, or in this case the CD, it takes about 15 to 20 seconds for it to appear and load it. You got to make sure it's a clean CD as well. I can add my collections, I can install it. I go and install it. It shows me it's over half a gig, this particular game. You can see how much space it can fill up the hard drive fairly quick, right? But we'll go and add it, and you can save it. It'll show you the progress. You can download it in the background, which is nice as well. And it will stay in your system. Now I have noticed here I have a Sega CD My Collections tab as well, so that's cool. So more systems you add, the more there is, which makes sense. Let's go ahead and start new game. You can see how quick it loads. Usually games take a while to load. Not the case with Polymega. Like, it dumps the game as you put it in there, right? So it will cache it. It takes a couple seconds to load. Here it is, Sega CD. Notice it skips the Sega CD intro, which you typically see when you turn on the Sega CD. Notice that. But I love Sonic CD. This is one of my favorite Sonic games. Fantastic soundtrack. If you haven't played Sonic CD, I highly recommend it. It's definitely a must-own for a Sega CD collector. Here's different. You can go to options and you can kind of set your different aspect ratios. You can also change the filters as well with the game. The filters are okay. The preset ones, you can kind of see it looks like a boob tube. I think it looks interesting. There's some scaling. That one looks really blurry. There's like a Game Boy one. There's also a Virtual Boy one, there's a Game Boy one. There's a Virtual Boy one as well. Here's another game I want to show you on the Sega CD. This is actually an import game I have. This is they call it Road Avenger. Road Blaster in the arcade, and it's like Dragon's Lair where you have to hit certain things at certain times. Basically interactive cartoon, awesome. Here's the different aspect ratio as well. I can show you different filters. I prefer just leaving it alone. I prefer just the HD. You can stretch it to full screen. This is Tomcat Alley for the Sega CD as well. The VMUs are classic. This is the normal standard without any filters. I think it looks great. But the VMUs back in the Sega CD there, man, that was so classic. In this one, there's kind of interactive movie, for sure. And a lot of this early Sega CD games were these VMU games, just like this one. Okay, Fighting Street. This is a TurboGrafx CD game I have. You can load different tracks. Side load, you can just listen to the soundtrack if you want, which I thought was a really cool feature of the Polymega. So if you don't want to play the game necessarily, you can listen to the soundtrack. Which, Fighting Street, by the way, is Street Fighter 1. I'm not quite sure why they didn't call it Street Fighter 1, but it's called Fighting Street, and I'll be honest, not a great fighting game. Capcom definitely stepped it up with Street Fighter 2. I think Street Fighter 2 is probably the best gaming sequel of all time, bar none. Like any genre, Street Fighter 2 is the best sequel. Such a huge upgrade from this one. So Ryu is one of the few characters that carried over to Street Fighter 2. I think Ken is in this as well, but maybe Saga. I'm not quite sure, but very few carried over to Street Fighter 2. And just really stiff controls. But this is how the arcade was too. Good soundtrack though. I mean, with the CD, you get some good soundtrack. The Grafx CD was a pretty good CD, one of the first early CD console gaming systems. Here's Unit Yuki. This is a homebrew game on CD, Super CD-ROM. So I want to show you this for two reasons. Well, three reasons really. A, it's a really good platforming game. Highly recommend it. B, it's a homebrew game, so we'll play that. And it's a Super CD game, so we'll play that as well. So you hit the three trifecta here with this game. Amazing soundtrack. Shout out to Sarumaru, my good friend who developed that game. Here is a Super CD game as well. This is Madden, the very first Madden for TurboGrafx and Super System 2, I believe. And we'll play it, which is great. So, man, how Madden has changed over the years. This is before they had licensed teams and names. This was like just the names of the cities, and the colors were different. But yeah, it played okay. I'm for the TurboGrafx, kind of old school. Definitely one to check out though. Going on to PlayStation 1, Siphon Filter 2. I used to play this game a lot as a kid. I used to love this. I played it a lot. You can go to save state. You hit the option button as well. So there's different options there. I can load my state to a game. Here's the intro. I do have a filter on this one. You can kind of see the filter. It's okay, right? Definitely plays and loads a lot better, faster than just typical PlayStation game. You have to make sure your discs are clean though, for sure, because if they don't, it won't read it, just like a normal system wouldn't read it. Move around. It's been so long since I played Siphon Filter 2. It's double disc, so it's a case like that. You have to load one disc and the second disc as well. This is Area 51, just moving on to Saturn. It will play Saturn games. I chose Area 51 because it's an amazing game, but you can see it's kind of slow with using my analog stick here, my D-pad. But they do have a Sinden game, a gun that's released, light gun, available, which is interesting. So I haven't tried it, don't own it, but supposedly it works pretty well. Here's another one. This is Quake for the Saturn. Not much to say about this game other than it kicks ass, and definitely check it out. Here's a racing game as well. It's on the Speedway. I think the Cyber Speedway. I forget what it's called, to be honest, but I just want to show you the frame rates. Looks pretty well. I mean, this is playing on the Saturn. I think it controls pretty well using the standard controller that comes with. I love these classic racing games like this. All right, moving on to Neo Geo. Here's what's interesting. It is region free, but you can actually load which version of the game you want to play. So I loaded the North American version, which is cool. So in many cases, this is true with other consoles as well. The Japanese game might be less expensive than the North American version, right? You can play it, load on here, play there. There's patches you can actually load, which is unique. So you can actually, there's patches, you can do it in English. So really not a big deal. This is King of Fighters 94. So if you have any like import games, you can load it here and play the American version just fine. That's one. And I was surprised how quick this loaded. Look how I'm playing. This is like a mini guy from Freddy Krueger. It looks like it's crazy, but really fun to beat 'em up. Okay, this is Flying Powertis. This is the one I have, Flying Powertis, of the Japanese version. Windjammers in North America. Great game, by the way. But Windjammers is more of an expensive game in North America because it's a highly sought out, great competition card. But look how fast it loads. And look how many cool folders I have in my collection now. But it's crazy. One of the Neo Geo CDs, notorious thing is how slow it was to load, right? I have the CDZ, which is even supposed to be faster, but still very slow. This Polymega loaded super quick. No issues at all. You just basically turn it on and plug it in. It loads pretty quick. But yeah, this is a really fun Windjammers. Amazing game. I believe it's out for the Switch and some other consoles recently. But it's very fun, especially when you're playing competitively. Definitely a game to check out. Japan versus Italy. And there's really no difference between the Japanese version or the North American version either. Alright, now I'm going to share with you my final thoughts about the console. Thanks for watching, guys. So in conclusion, what do I think about the Polymega console? Now, despite my personal experience working with the CEO, Brian, and the cold shoulder and ignore me and breaking some promises, I think this is a pretty cool console, to be honest with you. With all that stuff aside, I think it's definitely worth checking out. It is definitely geared for the collector, someone who, like myself, who has a bunch of physical games, who appreciates physical games, all that. Now, this has not been hacked, to my knowledge. It hasn't been hacked. I'm sure it has, but I'm sure people have probably gone in and probably hacked it. You can probably dump ROMs onto it and you turn it into a PC. At that point, though, if you're dropping $550 on this and opening up and putting a bunch of games on it, you're better off getting a Raspberry Pi or something a lot less expensive, because emulation's gone a long way. You don't need to pay that much money for a console to do that. You can get these mini PCs for much less than $550 to emulate that. So this is really for a collector like myself who wants to dialogue and preserve their games. I think it's a pretty cool unit itself. I didn't have experienced any issues with any of the games, although I hear it's not compatible with 100% of the library, right? Being emulation, that's what you get. It does come with internal BIOS, which is nice. So you plug in and play. You can load your own BIOS for each emulator if you prefer that. So if you find a better BIOS, better emulator, you can sideload that through a USB. I wish there were more than just 2 USB spots in the front. I wish there was 4. That way, if there's games like you're playing on the N64, there's 4-player games, a little bit easier. I think you have to get an adapter for that. Overall, I really like the menu. I thought the menu was really nice. Now, when I first got this console, there's some really cool built-in games in it. A lot of games from Pico Interactive. 54 Winks, or whatever the game's called, for the PlayStation 1. There's some really cool Super Nintendo games. There was like 30 plus games that were preloaded onto this. I couldn't get the games to load without updating it, so I ended up updating it, and once I updated it, many of those games disappeared, straight up disappeared. So now there was only a fraction of those games available, maybe like less than 10. So I'm assuming there was maybe some disagreement or something that happened between Pico and the other licensed companies, that maybe something fell through, and then so they removed those games. So I was kind of forced to update it, which I think it's fine if you're online. I think updating is good because they fix any bugs or any issues with the software, firmware, anything like that. But then when they start updating and removing things and take things away, that's kind of a bummer in itself, right? But I think some of the games they included are pretty cool. Now, what I've heard, they're going to create like a digital online store, so arcade games will be available. I've heard I heard they have an agreement with Atari, so some of the Atari licensed games will be available for digital purchase through their online digital store. To my knowledge, the Polymega is only available on their website, right? I think initially when I was talking to Brian, I think he was planning on doing like Amazon or Best Buy, some other units or other but it's only available on their website, so it's not hugely readily available. I'm not quite sure their marketing dollars. I know when they initially announced that it was going to be emulation, not FPG, as they initially promised, there was some backlash in the community. People were very skeptical. The thing took forever to come out, which I understand, especially with COVID, right? COVID definitely delays things. We, like Collector Vision Games, my company I own, we had some delays with our console, the Phoenix. Eventually did come out, but console development takes a long time. Working licenses is a long time, so they're trying to do what they can to keep this legal. All the games that's included are licensed games. Now, again, I'm sure you can sideload a bunch of games on here on your own if you want to do that, or borrow a friend's games and dump those games on here. That's entirely up to you. I do like that it has a network cable, so you can do some LAN stuff. The controller that it comes with, I would say it's decent. It reminds me of like a PlayStation 4 controller at the end of the day. It kind of feels like a PlayStation 4. It's pretty good for a universal remote. Now, I've heard with some of the games like PlayStation 1, some of the other games like Saturn, if you don't want to use the D-pad, you can use the left analog stick. All you have to do is hold clear and tap on this button here. None of the games I tested, that worked for. So I don't know if it was just the games that I was playing that didn't work, but maybe it's just, like those games weren't designed for analog. But if that works, that's cool. But for me personally, I couldn't get those games to work. And every module has its own controller, okay? The unit itself does come with compatibility to play, use different controllers, right? So the BitDo controllers will work if they're wired. Xbox 360 controller, that will work. The RetroBit, Genesis or Saturn controllers will work on this, but they have to be plugged in USB to the front. There's 2 units in the front. Overall, what I think about this, I'd probably give this like a 7.5, maybe to an 8. I think if you're a collector and you want to kind of have a one-stop shop to play your games in one place, this is definitely something to take a look at. And you can certainly do that here. You can change the filters. You can do that on FPGA as well. But the filters on here are okay. I thought it was kind of odd that there was like a Virtual Boy filter and there was a Game Boy filter. I'm not quite sure why that would be, who would use those, to be honest, but I guess they're there. I'm sure they can do subsequent updates and change them if you want. But for the collector, I do recommend checking this out. $550 is kind of pricey. Initially, this thing retailed for $400 to give you an idea. So they definitely raised it $150 just in the past several years since it's come out. So the expenses have come out. I'm sure this cost them a lot of work to put together, and it's definitely for a niche market. Hopefully they can survive. Hopefully they can partner with another distributor, because selling it on your site alone is going to be hard to get the word out. So I wish them luck. No hard feelings towards Brian or the crew, but I just wish things were a little bit differently. I wish, communication, very important in my book, not a good look. But thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you soon. Let me know what you guys think. As always, thank you for subscribing, and game on.